Hello and welcome. I'm Joke Rogers from here, Channels Television in Lagos. Stay with us in the next half hour for news from Nigeria and the continent.
Hello, I'm Vincent McCory, Voice of America, coming to you from our global headquarters here in Washington.
Barely a year after his last visit to Nigeria during President Muhammadu Buhari's inauguration, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry returned to hold talks with Mr. Buhari, state governors and religious leaders.
In a colorful display of traditional music at the Sokoto Caliphate, John Kerry is warmly welcomed by his host, the Sultan of Sokoto, His Eminence Mohammed Saad Abubakar III, and other religious leaders during his first stop on his visit to Nigeria. At the heart of U.S. Secretary Kerry's words to the leaders is the need for effective approaches in countering violent extremism while upholding the right of citizens.
One of our tasks, one of our central tasks, and almost every single religious leader I just heard in the other room talked about this task, has to be to remove the vulnerabilities in our own position. To effectively counter violent extremism, we have to ensure that military action is coupled with a reinforced commitment to the values this region and all of Nigeria has a long legacy of supporting. Values like integrity, good governance, education, compassion, security, and respect for human rights. It is understandable that in the wake of terrorist activity, some people are tempted to crack down on everyone and anyone who could theoretically pose some sort of a threat. I caution against that today. Extremism cannot be defeated through repression.
His next stop is the presidential villa in Abuja to meet with President Muhammadu Buhari, who pledged his commitment to the anti-corruption crusade during his campaign. The president also promised to fight terrorism without unnecessary use of force and institutionalize the anti-corruption crusade. During a closed-door meeting, the U.S. Secretary of State, among other things, commended the president's efforts so far in tackling corruption and its associated problems. This may be Mr. Kerry's last visit to Nigeria before he leaves office, but Nigerian leaders and citizens will be keen to see more results from the warming relationship between both countries.
You're watching Africa 54. I'm Joke Rogers. The games of the 31st Olympiad concluded in Rio de Janeiro on August the 21st, and Nigerian athletes participated in football, track and field, basketball, and many more events. Now, here to talk about this is Channels Television's head of sports, Austin Okon-Akpan. Welcome, Austin.
Good to be here, Joke.
Right. From the African perspective now, tell us, what can we learn from the just concluded Olympic Games?
A lot, Joke, about two sides to the story. The good side, this is Africa's most successful Olympics, 45 medals in total. Kenya, Ethiopia, and of course South Africa, they put up a very good showing at the Games. There's also, mention Nigeria's football team that went on to win bronze despite all the problems. The bitter side of the story is none of these teams went to the competition without some problems. Let's begin with Nigeria, the struggle in Atlanta, and how the team waited till about 3 days to the end of the games to get their kits. That's a big problem for Africa they need to look at. Kenya didn't go into this competition without some of their officials being indicted for corruption. Same with South Africa, where some athletes were even complaining of poor welfare. Also, Ethiopia had their fair share of the problem with the officials not giving athletes the sort of attention that they need to get before the games. So what does this say for Africa? From an African perspective, we can do better if we give more attention to those things that the Europeans, Americans do to make sure that their sports is thriving.
All right, so what steps, can we learn from this, knowing that, there are millions of people in Nigeria and, of course, other African countries with huge potential to exceed in any sports, you know, taking place at the Olympics. How can we prepare more to do better?
That's right, because everything starts from home. So now that the Games has been concluded in Rio, the next stop is Tokyo 2020. Joke, we have 4 years to start giving more attention to grassroots sports development, to start looking at the schools, to look at ways we can not just discover talent, but nurture them and see what we can make them become in 4 years. So Africa needs to come back now, discover a framework, a workable framework, not just the one where we'll just be talking. Let's find ways we can go back to the schools, get kids involved, combine school, work and sports, and see ways we can discover talents.
Right, despite just winning, you know, the bronze medal in the football event, are there any Nigerian athletes that you think did well in Rio, despite the challenges, and that, you know, maybe that's where we can start from for Tokyo, for instance?
Okon-Akpan became the first African to make it to the quarterfinals in the table tennis singles event. That's really massive. That means he's been making a steady rise. It means we also need to give that sort of player more attention. Chieruka Okogu. We don't know much about rowing. Everyone just sings the nursery rhyme of row, row, row your boats, but nobody understands that it's a, you know, beautiful sport. But Chieruka has put in the spotlight now. What do we need to do? We encourage such girl to keep rowing, to keep winning, and the federation, don't go to sleep. Start looking for ways they can discover more Chierukas. Get your night talking about, you know, the sport.
All right. Austin, thank you so much for coming on Africa 54.
Thank you, Joke. Always a delight to do
right,
this.
So that's our head of sports, Austin Okon-Akpan, talking about the Olympics in Rio just concluded.
Now, a bombing in Yemen has killed at least 54 people on Monday. A suicide bomber detonated a car bomb into a militia compound in Aden's Mansoura district in one of the deadliest attacks claimed by Islamic State in the southern Yemeni port city. Now, the Director General of Yemen's Health Ministry in Aden told Reuters that at least 67 other people were wounded in that attack. A security source says the attack targeted a school compound where conscripts of the Popular Committee's forces allied to President Rabu Mansour Hadi were gathered for breakfast. Witnesses say the suicide bomber entered the compound behind a truck that had brought in breakfast for the conscripts. Now, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, South Africans have been casting votes in local elections, and their choices are leading to some major changes in the country. That story and more coming up after the break.